I think I was almost sex trafficked. So for context, the town I live in has an alarmingly high number of missing women. I just recently moved here in the beginning of August and it's given me the creeps ever since. Anyways, during the first month of me living in this new town, around late August, my family and I decided to go to our local grocery store. It's similar to Costco as it's very big and has a variety of things. This happened around evening time, but it was still summer and light out. I was walking around the store and I noticed a man trailing a few feet behind my family and I. I'm a very paranoid person and tend to jump to conclusions on a regular basis, so I told myself it was a coincidence that he appeared to be in each part of the store I just so happened to be in. I separated from my family for not even a second to look at the clothing selection. Keep in mind they were only one aisle over and could see me if I only took a few steps forward. As I was scanning through the clothes, the same man I had seen behind us walking through the store came up really close to me and held his arm out as if about to touch me. But I saw him in my peripheral vision and turned around quickly. He said to me,
"I'm security, and I'm gonna have to ask you to leave."
He said this with no expression on his face and in the most serious tone. I said, "Excuse me?" And he smiled huge and said,
"You're just too distracting."
How weird. He was an old white man. He was bald, dressed in very generic clothing, khaki pants, and a plain white t-shirt, and he was also wearing sunglasses inside the store. Anyways, I told my family about the encounter immediately, and he was yelled at. We also told security, and he was kicked out. I remember noticing the whole time he was following us around, shopping. He wasn't even looking at any merchandise to buy, and he had nothing in his hands. Not sure if I overreacted, but it was definitely weird. A year or so ago, I was walking around downtown in our little city and doing some shopping. I had a coffee and a bag of some items, minding my own business. I had just turned out of a shop and started down the sidewalk when I noticed a disheveled looking man suddenly perking up and locking eyes with me. The only way I can describe the look he gave me was dark, maybe even angry. He moved off the wall he was on and fell in step about 10 feet back. This was the middle of the day, maybe 2 p.m., but there wasn't a ton of people around. I walked for another block or so, peeking over my shoulder and realizing he was still there. His eyes were still on me and he was looking incredibly menacing. Even though I hadn't gotten far, I could tell on my gut that he was following me. I saw the open door to a nail salon coming up in front of me and immediately ducked inside. I hurried to the front of the desk and told them I was being followed and that I was scared. There were maybe 2 or 3 workers there, plus a client. One of the workers took me to a private room in the back, but before I was even seated, the man had come inside with a lit cigarette. I could hear them telling him he couldn't smoke in the salon and that he needed to leave. He stood there, smoking for what felt like an eternity before walking out without a word. They shut and locked the door behind him while I tried not to cry in the room I was hidden in. The whole ordeal from seeing the man to getting him to leave was probably only 3 minutes. I stayed in the salon for another 5 minutes or so, gathering myself before one of the workers walked me back to my car and I went home. I don't want to imagine what he would have done had I not noticed him and trusted my gut. He very well could have followed me to my car and held me up at it. I realized at the salon that I didn't even have my phone on me. Trust your gut, people, and don't be afraid to ask for help. When my daughter was 2, I was having a tough time as a single mother and I decided to take a road trip up to Highway 1. I made reservations in Trinidad at a cool cabin in the woods within walking distance of the beach. Before I left, my stepfather gave me a loaded .38 revolver, which I stored under the driver's seat. Sometime after driving through San Francisco, it was very late and dark and nobody was on the highway. My daughter was sleeping peacefully in her car seat next to me. Back then we could legally have seats in the front. I noticed a car coming up behind me and passed, but then slowed down, driving alongside me. I sped up and slowed down but could not shake him. I looked over and this guy had his interior light on and was furiously gesturing for me to pull over. I knew I had to find a safe place. There was nobody else on the road and I was running low on gas. There was just nothing on this highway for miles. I kept driving, but this guy would not leave me alone. I was getting very frightened, but the mama bear was coming out and I was getting very angry as well. I knew he could see my kid, who was still sleeping. Finally, there was an exit up ahead and a gas station in the middle of nowhere, so I took the exit with the guy closely following me. I wasn't sure what to do. The gas station was brightly lit, but it had no customers. I didn't feel that it was safe to pull in, so I slowly passed it and drove further into the dark, deserted landscape and pulled into a large dirt area and drove quite a ways off the highway with him following. Absolutely nothing around. I knew I was in big trouble and needed to take control and wanted to put him in a vulnerable situation. Mama Bear was in full protective mode and I was pissed. I stopped the car, grabbed the gun, and jumped out, locking the car behind me. As he pulled up, I ran around to the passenger side and waited. He got out of his car and quickly moved towards me, and I suddenly held the gun up, visible in the moonlight. He came to a halt, surprised, and I then leveled the gun across the car, taking aim, and waited. He stood there, weighing his options, and then turned around, got back in his car, and left. Not a word was spoken.